There's one rising country on everyone's lips: China.
China plays a leadership position for the world.
There is just no country that presents a broader threat than China.
But there's a quiet superpower that's been growing stronger for decades, and you haven't even noticed it. And once you see it, it's hard to look away.
And we will never, ever let that happen. We will stand up.
Enough of this cheap talking. We have to react in a very decisive way.
We're moving from a bipolar world potentially to a tripolar world. The Europeans have spending power, they have a military budget. This could actually change the makeup of the great power players that we see.
This is the rise of a third superpower, the European Union. So how did we get here? And why doesn't it feel like one? At the end of World War II, Europe was decimated. 20 million people had died and most of Germany was flattened. 9 of the current 27 states were part of the Warsaw Pact with the Soviet Union, and there was eagerness politically to avoid any more war in Europe. In this backdrop, leaders like Churchill proposed a European family, or the United States of Europe.
We must build a kind of United States of Europe. If Europe were once united, there would be no limit.
Starting with the Schuman Declaration, the Europeans, mainly France and Germany, tied themselves together economically through the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community. Politicians at the time concluded that if these previously warring countries couldn't physically use coal and steel without one another, then they wouldn't be able to wage war with each other. And it worked. Starting with just 6 countries, this union grew, changing from the ECSC to the EEC to the EC and finally the EU, swelling in numbers to its current membership of 27 nations. But if there are 27 different countries, how can it be a superpower? Since the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, there have been growing signs of consolidating influence and global strength, which are starting to make the US and China sit up.
共同来推动中欧关系能够行稳致远。
But to start, what exactly is a superpower? A superpower can be defined as a country with the ability to project its dominating power and influence anywhere in the world. The top traits of which being economic power and military power. Every day we hear of China's rising GDP and economic strength. We see its GDP standing at $17.7 trillion. The US is just ahead of that at $22 trillion. And the EU is, well, it's nowhere because it isn't a country. But if we were, for argument's sake, to stack all 27 EU countries' GDP on top of one another, something very odd happens. Our GDP stands at $16 trillion. That's more than India, more than Japan. The EU is third globally. And remember, that doesn't even include the UK. On top of that, the euro is considered the second reserve currency. With over 164 currencies, the euro holds 20% of the world's currency reserves. That's more than the British pound or the Chinese yuan. This makes the EU an economic powerhouse. But all that doesn't matter much unless you have the military is the, to coin a phrase from this lady, backstop for all nations. It provides the necessary protections for a country to secure itself from threats both foreign and domestic. Since the end of World War II, the United States has been the dominating force globally. But just recently, and when I say recently, I mean like a month ago, March 2022, something extremely interesting happened and will make you realise that the EU is no longer messing around.
Because the war in Ukraine has profoundly shaken us.
This is a defining moment. We will rethink European defence.
A new Europe able to protect its borders, to stand up if necessary against Putin if it is necessary.
All 27 member states gathered to discuss the future of the EU and how to fight against the autocrat Vladimir Putin. With renewed fears of a war in Europe, the Union leaders realised that they can no longer rely on entirely peaceful relations with outside forces. This is something Emmanuel Macron started.
We must move from a Europe of cooperation within our borders to a powerful Europe in the world, fully sovereign, free to make its own choices and master of its own destiny.
EU leaders have realised that they can't rely on anyone but themselves. So in March 2022, they signed the Versailles Declaration. one of the most groundbreaking agreements the bloc has ever made. The EU Council President, Charles Michel, called this the birth of EU defence.
Ce pas en avant pour faire en sorte que cette offre de la défense soit une réalité. Eh bien, en réalité, cette offre de la défense, elle est née ce week-end.
But who cares? The EU has no army. If we look at any of these graphs, we can see, wait, let's just apply what we did to economics to the military. And look again. We see some truly shocking results. Active military personnel in the EU sits at over 1.2 million soldiers, putting it in the top 5 in the size of a standing army in the world. It has more warships than most nations, more battle tanks than the United States, and no nation has agreed to become part of some large super army controlled by Brussels. But what they can be part of is a joint defence agreement to ensure that if a country attacks one, they attack them all. This NATO-style defence pact could be managed by the EU and not by NATO. NATO members must agree that the Supreme Commander must be from the USA. And if America votes for this guy again as president...
The European Union, of course, was set up to take advantage of the United States, to attack our piggy bank, right? And you know what? We can't let that happen.
Is that something the EU really wants? Economically, the EU is top 3. Militarily, the EU is top 5. We are strong. Very, very strong. But why don't we feel like it? The answer is extremely complex, but at its essence, it's down to culture. Go with me on this.
We may be a small country, but we're a great one too. Country of Shakespeare, Churchill, the Beatles, Sean Connery, Harry Potter, David Beckham's right foot, David Beckham's left foot company.
What makes a country at its very core is its sharing of cultural nodes. Every nation has poets that we learned in school, TV shows that we watched, food that we eat, things that we do. These are all nodes that when pulled together makes up something greater than oneself. And they don't even need to be positive. The Democrats and Republicans hate each other, but there's a saying in politics in America.
Politics stops at the water's edge.
And that is what protects them and makes sure that they are the strongest country in the world. The EU has nothing. It's the not having an affinity with one another that makes the EU lack any sense of superpower. Many people in the EU don't even know that they have a national anthem. It's fucking Beethoven, Ode to Joy. How cool is that? We made this. Not to say European countries need to lose culture, but if we can create more shared ideas as European Union members, if we can become more unified with more foreign policy moves and realise that our borders don't stop in the country but on the west coast of Ireland or the eastern border of the Republic of Cyprus, we can consolidate into a union that is the most powerful, ethical and democratic union in the world. If we don't, Russia, China, the Middle East, the USA will change us, and that will make everyone in the EU weaker.